Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds Edge to Edge Transformation. Now, speaking of transformation, we have to look at the big picture. And one big picture guy I got to know over the last 30 years is Sridar Iyengar. He doesn't consider himself a technologist, but he's been involved in everything, including forming the world's largest organization of entrepreneurs. Sridhar, tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up here today.
I was born in India 3 days before India's independence. All were born with hope of what India and the world could become. So there is a generation of us which were born basically saying, hey, things are going to get better. How can I be part of it? I left India in 1968, to go to the UK. After 16 years in the UK, I decided that perhaps I should move to the US. I was persuaded to move to the US, especially to Silicon Valley, because that's where the changes were taking place, which I thought would be impacting society a lot more. Though I must admit, initially I came as much for economic reasons, as much for family reasons, as for anything else. I was at KPMG. I worked with a lot of tech companies, some of them which are household names. Those were companies which were in the stage of formation. Venture capital itself was in the stage of formation. It was a partner in a VC fund who eventually persuaded me to move to the US and saying, hey, the way you work in UK seems that you'll be very proactive in the way in which you work with clients in the US. So I've been in the Silicon Valley now since 1984. And of course, the Silicon Valley of 2023 is very, very different from the Silicon Valley of 1984. I am pre what I would call even internet. For the large companies, the HPs, the Intel, the National Semiconductor, Apple was still nascent at that moment in time. But things have moved so fast. I'm not a technologist, but there's one thing which I do very well. I know how technology can do certain things. If you focus on the end result of what you want to achieve, and then say, okay, humans are doing this now. If I had to develop a technology, what would it be? My mother used to say when I was young, Sridhar, you always think around things. If I ask you to touch your right ear, you go like that instead of going straight. And I think that is a part of my DNA. I like to find a way of doing things differently. And once I've done it one way, it bores me. The next time I want to try, there's some other way. There's always a pace of continuous improvement. Maybe my culture and the way my parents brought me up have got a lot to do with that. Is always look for a better way to do things and always make sure that what you do does not knowingly hurt anybody else.
I still recall you were the first person in the United Kingdom to be the head of KPMG who came from a different country. Is that true?
I don't claim to be the head of KPMG, but I was the first non-British partner in the UK firm of KPMG. Everybody before me were from Britain. They had maybe lived overseas, but they were basically British. I was the only first colored partner in the UK firm of KPMG, a colored partner in the US firm of KPMG. And I made partner in the US firm when I came from UK into US in 84. I made a colored partner here in 87.
So, what was it like to be involved in corporate governance in the early days of the technology revolution, from the days of the Apples and the Intels? And how has corporate governance changed through the decades to now what it seems to be?
Even though I worked for an audit firm, my specialty was basically international structuring, for all these companies. I've been involved in the international structuring, some major companies in the Valley, in the way they set up their overseas operations. Our governance structure was very sort of formal. We basically represented the audit committee side of corporate governance in a way to make sure that all the ways in which the company did its finances, the way it reported its finances, the way it dealt with growth and everything else was reflected from a financial perspective in the correct way. That was the system of governance. But even in those days, There were situations where you would say that, look, while as governance is not something which is absolutely critical or not seen as critical by some of the startups, there are other priorities: product development, building a team, going to market. All of these take much greater priority than making sure that the governance side. But somebody's got to do the hygiene part, of all of this. And that was basically relied on within the company. Maybe some legal firms and others help as far as the legal side of it was concerned. In the early years of my Silicon Valley career, the focus was not so much on governance, but on compliance with existing rules and regulations to see how this will grow. Even in those days, the companies which thought about governance, which started initially with having regular meetings of their board, which consulted their board, which kept their boards involved, which kept their investors involved. With history, I would say that those companies succeeded much better, faster than the others who did not pay any attention to those things at all. And as you grow, your vision changes to a certain extent. If anything, it becomes much broader than you were. Initially, you're focused on certain things, but your focus becomes, much, much greater. But I found that certain entrepreneurs who thought about implementing SAP and Oracle right at the beginning, their vision of how big their company were going to grow in the future, because they planned, basically saying that I will eventually use this anyway. Why have the trouble of shifting from one to the other? Why not use it? And I've used this as a standard. Work with people who, at first glance, you feel that you can trust. If there is a feeling that you can't have open, honest communication with somebody right from the beginning, whatever role you play, then the best thing for you to do is not continue that relationship. And I've always followed that. I have turned down very many opportunities because I didn't feel personally comfortable that my values and the values of the person I was talking to were aligned.
Yes, and it's been a privilege to get to know you over the last 30 years. Right, it used to be all about technology at one time, but now even the stakeholders and how good companies view their stakeholders has shifted. In what ways do you think it has changed or broadened?
I don't think we should treat it as an either or. I think companies are still as concerned with being in the cutting edge of all the technologies which they can use. But whereas previously they used it more as a tool for efficiencies and productivity and reduction of costs, now I think there's an added dimension in the way in which you use your technology. Is this technology that I am going to use, is it going to have side effects which will cause harm to a greater of my stakeholders? And the definition of stakeholders is what has changed at the corporate boardrooms. I think previously the stakeholders, who still, in my view, deserve and get significant attention, are the investors. The next group, for me, it's always been the workers. Making a difference in their lives, And then, of course, finally, you have the customers. Somebody would put customers in between the two to say, well, customers first, which generates the revenue which you can help both the investors and the worker group. So between the three, those were the previous. But now people are starting to think beyond that. What is this going to do to the community in which my company is? What is it going to do to the next generation of employees, children of my employees? We are now looking at this whole stakeholder in a much, much broader way. In fact, one of my boards, the chairman, basically said, what's our purpose? Why do we exist? And then you start deciding all the things that you do which could reconcile to that. The enlightened companies are getting a lot more active in the whole area of looking at the world in a very different way. Now, I've been very fortunate to be on the boards of some of those companies.
You are probably the first person with a financial background who was involved in the formation of one of the largest entrepreneurial organizations, the Indus Entrepreneurs. How did you end up being there and also being one of the most successful presidents of TIE, TIE?
These things happen. My wife always says, you've been very lucky. I come across organizations. I see something I like, I follow. I was asked by my firm to take a focus on India. When India started opening up in 92, 93, they asked me to say, hey, you be our eyes and ears, with regard to what's happening in India. And I saw an opportunity to sponsor a group of Indian businessmen who were coming to the US. It was from a group called FICCI, Federation of Indian Chamber and Commerce. I sponsored that with KPMG. And I traveled with this group, which included some people who have remained friends. And when I was sponsoring that, I was going to 6 cities in the US. And when I was looking at Silicon Valley, my own backyard, I said, who's the person or which group of people can help me bring the right people to a meeting with these group of Indian industrialists so they can share what's happening in India? And that's when somebody pointed out that there is this new group which is being formed called TIE. TIE had not officially been formed. It was still a very, very informal. There were a group of people who were meeting on some regular basis to promote entrepreneurship. And they, of course, coming from India, had an affinity towards, generating entrepreneurship within both the Indian community in Silicon Valley, as well as the connections to entrepreneurs from India. So that was the way I came across TIE. Was at the very first conference of FICCI, sponsored by KPMG. We partnered with TIE to do that meeting, in Silicon Valley. To take credit, it was the people like AJ Patel, Suhash Patil, Bipin Shah, all the original founders of the 5 or 6 people who started this whole idea. They saw that, look, I bring a skill or a network, which is very different. These were people who were homegrown entrepreneurs in their own right, but they never worked for a large international multinational company with its networks across the world. So they basically co-opted me into TIE and said, you bring something which we don't have, because we always need accounting advice, we need tax advice, we need financial advice, we need companies with whom our entrepreneurs might need to work, and your clients could be those companies. And also at that time, when the first meeting was held, it was decided that, look, they would not normally take professionals into the charter member group of TIE, but they would take 2 people, one accountant and one lawyer, as the initial group of chartered accountants. So maybe I lucked out because I had been working with them. I was asked to be that accounting TIE charter member, which is how I joined, and became very, very active after that.
And you also led many initiatives around the world. You served on the boards of many international companies. What was that experience like?
Because of my connection through KPMG to India, I have been on the board of KPMG India ever since it was formed, which is in 93. In 97, there was a change in leadership, and we had appointed a person to lead the Indian firm. And he was from Canada, but he had to go back to Canada. In the transition, I looked at my own position and said, I've done everything I want to do in the US. And I basically volunteered to become the CEO of KPMG in India. And I went to India in 97 on a full-time basis. And I spent 3 years. And if you recall the 97 to 2000, those were the years of change. Y2K, with a lot of Indian companies sending people here to help American companies solve that Y2K issue. I was also very active with NASSCOM. And curiously, it connects to my first connection to TIE, which was the group of Indian industrialists who came from India to the US. Among them was this very soft-spoken, mild individual who was leading a IT technology company at that time. He was the founder of the IT technology company. His name was Narayana Murthy. So I met Narayana Murthy when Infosys was a $3 million company. And because I lived in Silicon Valley and he was in technology, we clicked among all the other industrialists from India who were basically from old line industries, from cement and textiles. And so he and I somehow connected at a different level. So when I became the CEO of KPMG India, Murthy invited me and appointed KPMG to lead the US listing of Infosys. So I was very closely involved. I was like the client partner on it. When I came back from India after 3 years, there was a part of KPMG which at that moment in time was our BPO practice. And there was some thought about taking that public. I was charged with coming up with the rationale and how to do it. So we were going to actually spin off a part of KPMG into a separate company because our people were leaving us for stock options in other companies. We said, how do we create a company which is KPMG controlled and owned, where they will get the surrogate of a stock option? So I was creating a BPO practice where we would do work for startups, basically in exchange for equity, which a lot of legal firms do and used to do, if you recall, Shankar. KPMG would similarly accept stock options in exchange for their services. And the idea was to create a mutual fund of stock options, which will then be parceled out to KPMG partners. A day which just passed, 9/11, stopped all that. I was due to present the final proposal for that to a group of partners on 9/11, and I was at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles when the planes hit. And that decision to roll that company was deferred. And when that happened, I basically said that, look, I've done everything else at KPMG. It's about time for me to move on. I was going to play golf for the rest of my life. And I did try to do that for 1 week. Within 1 week of my retirement in 2002, I got a phone call. And it was Murthy asking me, Sridar, I'm at a board meeting. I would like you to be on our board. And I was surprised because I said, Murthy, I have not thought about being on boards at all. And my first comment to him was, I can't be on your board. And he said, why? I said, KPMG are your auditors. All the partners who are doing your work, I made them partner when I was head of KPMG India. How can they consider themselves to be independent if I'm sitting on the board? They may accept something just because they don't want to embarrass me. And I said, that's enough of a conflict for you to consider. And he was taken aback by that statement. And a week later, he called me back. I checked. You can be on the board 1 year after you retire from KPMG. That's the NASDAQ rule. And that's how my board career began in 2003, going on the board of Infosys on 1st of April. And since then, most of the boards I've been on are people I have met during those 3 years I was in India, whether it was ICICI Bank, Dr. Reddy, Mahindra Holidays, all of these came out of connections from those days.
Now, what you're doing is very interesting to me. You call yourself a mentorpreneur. Can you get into that a little bit?
Shankar, it is no different. The reason I got involved with Thai, I can remember even when I was working full time at KPMG, one Tuesday every month, I would go to the Thai office and I would sit. And I had give 1 hour. So I spent 8 hours, I'll meet 8 entrepreneurs who will come. So I've always enjoyed things which are at the beginning, because at the beginning you can have an influence, you can shape things. It's difficult to do things which are transformative when the company is large. I've always loved working with young people, and that goes back to my childhood. My father started a sports club, cricket club for young people. I was brought up in that culture. That's also why I resonated with what Thai was trying to do. The concept of giving back, successful people giving back. And you can give back in terms of funds and everything else. But the most important thing to give back, in my view, has always been time. Over the last 20 years, I would say I have spent more time with people below the age of 30 than I've spent with people above the age of 30. It has been such a great learning experience for me because I have a natural affinity towards young people. I think their needs are greater. It's like a billiard ball. As you get it going in the right direction, it's more likely to keep going. And they've got longer to go. So I've always viewed that young group as the people, if you can make a difference in their lives, if you can give them the right values and the right direction, then they're likely to make a lot more difference for a much longer time.
Speaking of youth and speaking of all the changes that are happening, we seem to be in some sort of a chaos. I mean, there's technology that's changing at breakneck speed. What advice or suggestions would you give to people when they are selecting their careers?
When I left India, my uncle who's still alive at 102, told me that, Sridar, in life, you cannot always do what you like. You must always like what you do. If I'm committing to something, I will give it 100%, 150%. You can't say, oh, that is the technology which is going to win, so I am going to do it. If you don't like doing it, don't do it. I read a book once called Never Work for a Jerk. So if you don't like the people that you're going to be working for or with, then that's another reason not to join. In the longer term, there'll be other opportunities which may not be initially as economically what I would call attractive. But in the end, if you want a balanced way of achieving your goals, then basically find something that you like doing. Or if you don't like it as much as you want, then when you start doing it, don't do it for the economic reasons. Do it for the sake that I'm going to give my 100, 150%. Because anything short of that is suboptimal both to you and to the people you're working for or with. My advice to young people always is, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Will you get fulfillment in doing this job, assuming that this is the only job you'll ever have? How long will you be able to cope with it? Of course, my generation, Shankar, very different. I worked for the same company for 35 years, even though I digressed into different geographies, into different areas of the firm. The firm was large enough to give me multiple options with regard to my career. There are very few days that in my long career, and even now, that I wake up not wanting to do the things I'm going to do that day. And that, in my view, is a very, very critical thing I try to inculcate on all the young people I see. You wake up in the morning and you say, oh, gosh, I got to go to work. Then I say, please stop. Steve, please go away from that job. Because if it doesn't excite you enough to go and participate, contribute, work with your team members, then you're not going to be your best.
Speaking of being your best, you had many roles, from the finance person to the person who supported thousands of entrepreneurs to being on the board of public companies and now as a mentorpreneur. Which part of it would you say you enjoyed the most?
I would say the ability to help whatever person achieve the goal. I'm a big picture guy. Even though I know how to do the detail, I must be very honest, detail bores me. I know how to do it. I can figure it out, but it is not where I want to spend my time on. So to me, it's the being part of the visioning of, where we are going, raising the bar at all times. That's the part which I've always enjoyed, even on boards. Nowadays, because of the legal and other sort of requirements, the board, you spend a lot of time on what I would call matters with regarding to compliance with existing rules and laws. But the key part is, where have you added value to what the company is doing? Added value not in terms of maybe introducing them to a customer, but in their thinking. Have the people at the top level moved along? Have you helped shape their thinking on the way in which they will address the next problem when you are not there? That's the part I've enjoyed more. So the mentoring part of it, because I had so many great mentors in my life who helped me. And that's why I say I gravitate towards younger people who most probably acknowledge the need for a mentor rather than the old ones who think that they already know everything.
No wonder you stay young all your life. Tell us about your new nonprofit 360 Plus. I heard you've even rescued young people out of Afghanistan.
Everything I've done in my life is connected in some shape or form. In the 60s, my brother came across a group of Peace Corps volunteers in India. They used to use our house as their house. I used to drink Kool-Aid. They used to get care parcels from their family in the US and they would share it with us, whereas they ate my mother's dosa. So I was brought up with them. But unfortunately, there was no such group of fellowships in India at that time. So I've always regretted the fact that I could not be part of a fellowship of some kind. When I finished Thai, the opportunity came for me to get involved with the American India Foundation Clinton Fellowship. Lata and Pradeep Kashyap and all the others who had been very, very active and supported AIF. When I joined AIF on their board in 2005, I said that I'll only join if you make me somehow part of the Service Corps Fellowship. Because I will live vicariously through these people who are doing what I would have done at their age if I had been given that opportunity. From 2005 to 2015, my life revolved around what then became the Clinton Fellowship of American India Foundation. I spent 30 to 40% of my time conceptualizing, thinking about it. In India, I used to visit with them, I'll stay with them. So I saw India at the NGO level. And then in 2015, after 10 years of doing that, there was one aspect which I had not done, because I always felt that the fellows were what I would call gap year between graduation and masters. Those kind of students or mid-career professionals who were going into India for the 10 months. But there was always a gap. I always felt that something needs to be done for high schoolers. The 16, 17-year-old group, in my view, if you can somehow mentor them in the right way, they will be a much more, because they are less influenced already and set in their views. So I've always wanted to do something with high schoolers. So the opportunity came with a few Clinton fellows. We formed this new NGO called 360 Plus. Shankar, over the last 20 years, I used to do 20 trips a year to India. I know how much I learned myself through travel, how my own daughter learned when she went to travel. Our children, holidays or even visits to a different country, how they benefited from travel, not just from seeing things, but from perspectives which they got of being there. So we, 5 of us who founded 360 Plus, we decided that we should give the same opportunity to kids which can't afford to travel. In the US, our standards are kids whose parents have a family income of less than $30,000. Majority of them are from single parent families. Some of them have not even been out of their town. So we focused on these low-resourced kids. And we select them and take them to India. We got the networks there for 3 weeks. We do a 3-month program of classroom teaching. We take them to India on a theme. So this year's theme was climate, mitigation, adoption, and adaptation. We use that theme to show them India in a different light. So that's what we do. It's basically helping low-resourced high school students have an experience through travel. And our motto is learning through travel. This year, we did something very different to bring some Ukrainian kids to the US. In the middle of a war, getting kids from Ukraine might be difficult, but we managed through the help of one of the companies I'm on the board to identify some students. And they were here for 3 weeks. And traveling with them, Shankar, is a joy. If you talk about staying young, traveling with a group of teenagers from whichever country is both a challenge and a very, very rewarding experience. In the last 5 years, more than 120 kids from 15 countries we have taken on such trips. We're still early. We're still sort of, very closely funded sponsors. The idea of giving children a travel experience as a way of learning is something I am absolutely wedded to. And I am hoping that for the next 20 years, I'll be able to do that. Just before COVID, in 2020, we had identified 50 kids. We were going to take them to India, 50 children from 15 countries. Through a contact of mine, we asked for some Afghan students to apply. 30 Afghan students applied. We only could pick 3 from Afghanistan. COVID happened first. So that year 20 cohort was canceled. One of my team members kept in touch with our Afghan group of 3. We supported their families, while they were there. We got one of the girls out to Kyrgyzstan, to the University of Bishkek on a USAID scholarship. We got another one to Pakistan, and he made his own way now to Italy, and he's applied for settlement in Italy. The last one, we were able to extricate her from Afghanistan 1 week before the Taliban stopped girls from leaving Afghanistan for studies. We brought her to India through some contacts. My team member had already got her a full scholarship at a school in Marin County. So she comes and visits our house. These high schoolers have become part of our family. not only are we mentoring them, we give them access to anybody in our network. We support them in higher studies in some cases where we can afford it. It's been absolutely fascinating, great experience.
And I would love to know how anybody who's listening to this can be a part of 360. So if there are any specific ways, let me know. Otherwise, definitely share the link to 360 Plus and other things that are happening.
We're always looking, and I always get opportunities where people will say, that, can we come on this trip? Because I travel with the kids and spending 21 days with teenagers from 4 or 5 different countries. And even kids from the same country who've never seen each other. This kid from Chicago, first time he's met somebody from New York. And you see the disparity in experience between those who have and those who have not is so great that I'm glad that we are trying to do a small thing to address that issue. All our kids, when they come back from the trip, they say this has been quite transformative. They decide on a different career. We've had some real great success, and we're very, very proud of it.
It's all about experiential learning.
It
So,
is.
so to anybody listening out there, I'm always looking for different perspectives, different views. Technology is all around us. The way we can direct technology is very important to know. So please come forward. I would love to hear from you. I would love to see how artificial intelligence can become a part of our natural intelligence in a way that's conducive to life and not separate from it. Thanks again, Sridhar. It's always a joy talking to you.
Thank you very much, Shankar, to give me the opportunity to just talk about something I love to talk about.